So one day, I was sitting on my couch watching a beautiful production of Les Miserables when this happens.
Hey, what are you watching, Mickey?
Les Miserables.
Oh, the movie when the guy steals the bread? Yeah, why is he complaining anyways? I mean, he totally could ask the baker.
No, he had to feed his son.
This badge of shame you'll show it till you die. It warns you're a dangerous man.
I stole a loaf of bread. My sister's child was close to death. We were starving.
You'll starve again unless you learn the meaning of the law.
See?
Oh, I got it. Well, stealing is still wrong. There were other methods of getting food other than stealing. I mean, he could have asked his baker for, at that time they had day-old bread, or he could have maybe asked a banker for a loan, or things like that, but it was all about immediate satisfaction.
This conversation led us to wonder, can people really make genuine judgments without knowing the whole story?
After some contemplation, some TOK terms, and a couple bags of chips, we finally came to the final question of, can one formulate a reasonable ethical judgment without prior context of situation X?
Some may indeed say yes, and others no. So what is the answer?
To answer this question, we must first define reasonable, ethical, and context.
First, let us define reasonable. Let us take this example into account. We were watching some funny videos on Facebook and encountered this gem.
How to make an electric guitar? Well, I don't know, but from the name of it, it's just a combination of guitar and electricity. Here's a simple one I made. Here's the basic electric guitar I made with 4 strings. We can add more strings if you want to. Strings are just wires stretched over a piece of wood, tied to nails on each end. The wires at this end are tied together in pairs as you can see, and each pair is attached to one of these cables, which we can plug them into the wall power plug. Please join me for the first time to hear how it sounds. And 1, 2, 3, 4.
One can say that through reason, he figured out how to build his own electric guitar, considering that he's never seen one before. His attempt was obviously a failure, but he did come to the conclusion that that is not in fact how to build an electric guitar. If someone were to see this on a social media site such as Vine or Facebook, they would only see the small frame of the video. The video we just played is what is seen on these sites. Therefore, people would think this guy is sort of an idiot. What they do not realize is that the original video is an electronics tutorial, and he has a wealth of knowledge of electrical components. He was using this video as an explanation of the safety hazards of electricity. And also, the original name of this video on YouTube is how to not make an electric guitar. Another example of reason would be in volleyball. One of the rules in volleyball is that you cannot cross the line under the net during the play at any time. If you do, the other team gets the ball and the point. Now, a bystander who doesn't understand volleyball may think this is a really stupid rule, but it's actually very reasonable. And it's very reasonable because there has been multiple accounts of somebody on the other side landing on the foot that is crossed over the line and getting hurt, such as dislocating their ankle. If maybe that bystander that didn't understand the reasoning behind this rule saw that event happening, they would deem this as something that was reasonable.
Now to define ethics. The example we will use is the example from the movie Quantum of Solace. We will look at the scene where James Bond puts his dead friend Mathias in a trash can and takes away his money. His partner asks if this is how James normally treats his friend. What she didn't understand was James and Mathias's previous relationship. And so James was trying to get away from the British intelligence agency, and he was also trying to escape his enemies. What he needed to do was exploit the political corruption of oil, and so he needed to find Dominic, which was the enemy, and to exploit him. And the money was vital to James's survival and the scene because it showed that he needed the money so desperately that he was willing to just put his friend in the trash can because he could not afford a funeral and it would have blown his cover. And he had to do everything with swift movement because he wouldn't have been able to escape his enemies or the British intelligence, and therefore they would have not been able to capture Dominic and exploited him. Therefore, James's actions were ethical in his attempt to get away from the enemy and exploit it.
Is that how you treat your friends?
He wouldn't care.
Let's go.
Now to define context. There's a pretty popular book and movie series, some of you might have heard of it. It's called Harry Potter, about some young wizards learning how to harness their powers by going to the wizarding school Hogwarts. In the first movie, after Harry is invited to study at Hogwarts, he goes to the train station and asks a regular person, or in that movie it's called a muggle, where platform 9 3/4 is. To a regular, non-magical muggle person, this doesn't actually exist, therefore resulting in a funny look given to Harry. Then he sees kids going to platform 9 3/4, which is a column in the train station, and follows suit.
Platform 9 But Hagrid, there must be a mistake. This is platform 9 3/4. There's no such thing, is there?
Now, going back to the situation with the electric guitar person, since many people have only seen a snippet of his stupidity and have not seen the real title or video, they do not realize that this is a real-life tutorial and it is a rather comical but informative introduction. The definition of reason as defined from the preceding examples is that analytically derived from previously obtained knowledge that excludes the consideration of emotion, morality, or ethics. They are separate entities.
The definition of ethics, as defined from the preceding examples, is the moral implication of X action. It can be arguably considered as subjective because it is dependent on the worldview and the moral background of the individual person. The moral background is relative to how they grew up and what they were raised on, such as religious beliefs. It also depends on the situation they are in and what choices and decisions they make based on their situation, such as shown in previous examples.
We can gather from this that context means the prior knowledge of the situation or full understanding of the situation at hand. If someone were to not see the name of the video, How to Not Build an Electric Guitar, or saw the first bit of where he electrocutes himself, they would seemingly call him an idiot for his actions. Also, in the example of Harry Potter, the conductor didn't know and or understand Harry's context and situation, and therefore could not help him to get to platform 9 3/4. Now, going back to the original question of, can one formulate a reasonable ethical judgment without prior knowledge or context of situation X?
We have two examples. There is no and there is yes, and here they are to argue each side. Now to argue that no, you cannot make a reasonable ethical judgment without context, I have a scenario. One day, a bystander was observing a girl without the context of her situation. A bystander might consider two factors. One of the girls is a victim of rape, or the girl may have irresponsibly had sex at a young age. The more common stereotype found through social media is that it is unacceptable for a young girl to have intercourse at a young age, and therefore it is not wise and is foolish due to this decision. Rarely does one consider that a girl may have been raped and that she did not intend for this to happen, meaning she wasn't sleeping around and got pregnant. So the question arises whether or not the bystander made a reasonable judgment about this girl. Another bystander who considered that rape was a likely cause for the girl's pregnancy was most likely viewed or considered contextual issues and made a reasonable claim that she was not, as one may define a girl, slutty. Another example about the bystander is that he's at the grocery store and observes a girl that had unprotected sex and is now pregnant. We could also say that he is friends with a Christian girl that got raped and is not going to abort. So while they go to the checkouts, he asks, "So, did you happen to get raped?" He would ask this because his friend did get raped and was very young as well. She then says, "No, I was just, sleeping around, but I am going to abort soon because my family cannot afford to take care of this baby and such." Thus, through language, the sheltered boy gains the knowledge that indeed not all girls are pregnant at a young age are or were raped, and or have the same beliefs. Therefore, in this situation, no, he could not have made a reasonable ethical judgment without context.
I would argue that yes, one can make a reasonable ethical judgment without context. The counterexample would be a man who caught his wife cheating. The situation is that he comes home early one day and conveniently finds out that his wife was cheating on him after he questioned whether or not she was cheating on him. He was unsure as to whether or not she had cheated on him, but was getting suspicious because certain and simple tasks that she usually did weren't being done around the house. He noticed periodically, for example, that the dishes weren't being cleaned, and he finalized his assumption when he came home one day and noticed that the bed wasn't made. Thus, one day he decided to pop in unexpectedly and caught his wife cheating. He never mentioned his reasoning to her or questioning prior to finding out that she was cheating. He only considered the idea that she may have been cheating. During the time in the video when he caught her that she was cheating, he questioned her whether or not she thought she would ever get caught, and she said she was going to tell him eventually. Therefore, he made a reasonable, ethical judgment without prior context of the situation.
You know what? All this fun, f***ing beds never get made around here. There's no f***ing nothing to eat in the fridge. Yeah, I knew something was going on. This house is always f***ed up. Nothing ever gets done around here. And it's like, what's she doing with her time all day?
Well, David, there are a couple of flaws to the argument. He did have some context, it just wasn't solidified. And though he was suspicious of the things observed, like the dishes and the bed not being done, there could be other reasons for that other than the wife cheating on her husband. He had suspicions and therefore acted upon them, in which in this case he was correct. Now, it would have been different if there were no irregular signs in the house that could lead to cheating and he suspected it, but that's not really a viable situation unless he reads minds or he can tell the future like Raven Baxter. Another situation could have been where the bed was not done and the dishes weren't clean, but she wasn't actually cheating on him, she was just being lazy, so there are a few flaws in that argument.
Yeah, I guess you're right, Nikki. So, ethics and reason balance each other out in making good judgments and having a good sense of discernment. Therefore, it is hard to make a judgment based on one or the other, or neither, and also without knowing full context.
So because of the previous arguments, we conclude that no. Going back to the original situation, David couldn't make a reasonable ethical judgment about Jean Valjean without hearing about his situation in the great movie Les Miserables.
That's all, folks.